Chapter 31. Ravens and Flowers. It seemed that during every moment of the last 3 years, all I could think about was staying alive and protecting my family. On our journey out of the famine lands, I concentrated on just one thing, and that was getting Alice over the border alive. We had crossed the border. We were alive. We had food and a safe place to live. Anna was almost like a mother to us, with her loving care and generosity. Through all the hunger and sadness, I kept on going, willing myself not to think or feel. But now that we were safe, I fell apart. While I repaired Anna's barn and chopped firewood for the winter, I mourned the deaths of Tato, Mama, Uncle Ilya, and the priest's family. I felt guilty about abandoning Slavko. I even felt guilty about Yulia. Maybe if I had spent more time with her, she wouldn't have felt the need to become such a little Stalinist. I was overcome with sadness and had a deep need to sleep and mourn. A similar transformation was happening with Alice. She brought in all the vegetables from the garden and wept as she helped Anna can and stew and dry them for the winter. Alice told me that she felt tremendous guilt about all the inventories she had taken and all the people labeled kulaks because of her lists. She worried about her father's fate and wondered how her grandmother was faring all alone in Toronto. Even though I was going through the same kind of emotions myself, it shocked me to see Alice fall apart. Anna took it in stride. "I had the Ukrainian stay with me last winter," she said. "After all that he lived through, it wasn't until he was safe that the emotion settled in. He got through it, and so will you." She praised us for the work we did and fed us small meals of nourishing food and made sure we got lots of sleep. In January 1933, Anna came back from the market with the news that Stalin had sealed the borders around Ukraine, and he made it illegal for Ukrainian farmers to leave their village. Without food and with no way of getting any, was it now their duty to die in place? I was grateful that Alice and I had gotten out when we did, but my heart was sick at the thought of Yulia still in Filivka. It didn't matter if you had joined the kolkhots or resisted. All rural Ukrainians were enemies now, and all were slated for starvation. And what of Slavko? The conditions at the tractor plant had been horrible when I left, and they would only get worse. But it was better to be at the tractor plant than in the village. Stalin wanted tractors. I hoped and prayed that Slavko would live. We were enveloped in snow, and the weeks slipped by. Entire days were slept away. During that hazy time, when I was awake, the pictures on Anna's walls seemed larger than life. There was, of course, the obligatory one of Stalin and another of Lenin, but she also had a faded photo of a young woman and man sitting formally side by side and staring solemnly out at the camera. Anna saw me staring at it one day, so she took it down and brought it to my bedside. "That's me," she said. "Our engagement picture." "Your husband?" I asked, pointing to the man. "Yevgeny was shot and killed during the Russian Revolution," she said. "Our son, Leo, was just a baby. I had him and Yevgeny's parents to look after all on my own." "Where's Leo now?" I asked. "Moscow," she said. "He works at a factory. That's where he met Marusha, his wife." "Do they visit often?" I asked. "A few times a year," she said. When Alice was stronger, she took out her father's photographs and showed them to Anna. "This is so bad," said Anna. "I don't understand why Stalin is doing this. Ukrainians are our brothers and sisters. Marusha, my own daughter-in-law, is part Ukrainian." "My father was arrested for taking these pictures," said Alice. "I need to get to Moscow, to the British embassy there. They need to see these. They need to help Papa." It's not so hard to take the train from here to Moscow, said Anna. Now that we were out of the famine zone, the train fares weren't inflated. Our pickpocket money from the streets of Kharkiv was enough for a single one-way ticket. That's perfect, I said. You only need to go one way, and you should leave as soon as you feel healthy enough. But what about you? Asked Alice. Aren't you coming with me? That would only complicate things, I said. You'll be leaving for Canada. I turned to Anna. With your permission, I'd like to stay with you for a bit longer. I want to contact Slavko and let him know where I am. Maybe he'll cross the border too. That means staying in the same place for a while. You can stay with me for as long as you want, said Anna. I appreciate your company and your help. As we saw Alice off at the train depot, I felt like my heart had been torn in two. I had resented Alice for a long time, but in the end, she had become like a sister. Please write, I said, hugging her tight. I want to know that you're safe. I want to know if your father is still alive. I'll write to you when I get back to Canada, she said. But remember, there are censors. If I mention ravens in my letter, that means that Papa is either dead or in a slave labor camp. What about the photographs? I asked. How will you tell me if you get someone important to look at them? Flowers, she said. Just before stepping onto the train, she thrust an envelope into my hand. I shoved it into my pocket, then waved once she found a seat on the train and sat down. When Anna and I got back home, I opened the envelope. It was a photograph of Alice standing in front of the rooming house in Kharkiv, where we'd taken refuge in the broken bathroom. Her father must have taken it before they began living at the tractor plant. She had looked so hopeful back then, so young too. I opened up my leather bag and withdrew the photograph she'd given me before, of my family in Filivka from when Mama and Tata were still alive. I set the photographs on the table so Anna could see them both. This is your Mama? She asked, putting her index finger over the shadow on Mama's eyes as if she could brush away the worry. It is, I said. And this is Tato. And the sister who betrayed you, and Slavko, who loves tractors, she said, tapping the faces with her finger. Yes, I told her. This is Auntie Paulina, who I hope is in Ternopil now, and my cousin Tanya. Such a sweet child, said Anna. Reminds me of Leo when he was little. She picked up the photograph of Alice and smiled. This is a brave girl. She is, I said. I hope she gets home safely. You've done a good job, said Anna. What do you mean? I asked. My parents are dead. My siblings are scattered. But you saved your aunt and cousin. You saved Alice, too. Yulia and Slavko made their own choices. You concentrated on what you could do instead of being distracted by what you couldn't. Her words were like a salve to my heart. Thank you, I said. I mailed a letter to Slavko, telling him where I was and letting him know that I missed him. In the end, I also wrote a letter to Yulia. I didn't know what to say because I was still angry with her. But I wished her well and hoped she was healthy. I also sent a letter to Auntie Paulina in Ternopil, letting her know that I was out of the famine zone and that Slavko was at the tractor plant. As the last bits of snow were melting in the woods, a letter arrived from Auntie Paulina. Her words were carefully chosen to evade being censored by the government, but she still managed to tell me everything I needed to know. Dear Neil, knowing that both of my nephews are alive has made my heart sing. Please know that you always have a home with me. Your cousin Tanya sends a kiss. With love, Auntie. Winter ended and spring arrived, but no letter came from Canada. Then, in July, I finally heard from Alice. When I opened the envelope, a photograph fell out. It was a picture of Alice looking strong and healthy. She stood beside a friendly-looking woman whom I recognized as her grandmother. In the background was a brick house with flowers in the garden. Flowers! Someone important was interested in the famine photographs. I collapsed into a chair. Relief washed over me. Her letter was short. Dear Neil, thank you for being my friend. Hope that we'll meet again in the future. Always, Alice. No mention of ravens. I flipped the paper over just to make sure, but the back of it was blank. I looked at the photograph again. No ravens. That meant Comrade White wasn't in a prison camp and hadn't been executed. A wave of relief passed over me. Anna came in just then and set a basket of berries on the table. You look happy, she said. Not quite happy, I said. But I am hopeful. I wrapped my arms around this woman who had been a stranger, but who had taken me in and nurtured me back to health through a long, cold winter. Thank you for your friendship. Stalin hadn't killed me. He just made me stronger. I would go home to my family when the timing was right. But no matter when that happened, I would always be grateful for my friends.